And former Clemson Tiger head coach Tommy Bowden joins us here on Clemson Sports Talk. Coach, welcome in.
I tell you, it's a good time of the year because this is when we start getting a little more clarity on about college football playoff, the championship games, and things like this. So it's an exciting time to be talking college football.
Yeah, look, no doubt about it. And I mentioned to the listeners before the break, this news coming out just moments ago about Jim Harbaugh, apparently, according to sources, is going to be banned from the sidelines. So you're a former head coach at the highest level in college football. I mean, what is the coach's impact on a game day, and how significant is this for Michigan?
You know, really on game day, most of the time he's a figurehead unless he's actively involved in play calling. And there's not a lot of those guys left. There are some head coaches that get actively involved in play calling, but most don't. Therefore, he makes a 4th and 1 call, a punter or go for it, 2-down territory. You know, where is that? Onside kick, a fake punt. You know, they make those type of decisions, which an interim head coach can make because you talk so much of them during the week on when you want to do it. So more of a figurehead. You know, I think the team's going to look up there and it'll be thought about by the team on Friday night and Saturday morning. So there's a tendency for the team to lose focus a little bit. But to be honest with you, game day, it's more figurehead unless he's an active offensive or defensive play caller.
Well, and the other thing, too, they have a huge game going up to play at Penn State. Not going to lie, that's a venue I wish Clemson would go play a game at some point in my life. I'd love to see that one unfold. But, you know, when you think about the College Football Playoff Committee, at this point, they've essentially said, look, we're not a disciplinary body. We're just judging what we see on the field. And I don't know what's going to happen on the field, but is it possible or even plausible that Bill Hancock and the executive directors there and the playoff committee have just decided we're just going to let this play out as long as possible? Because my theory is they just want to keep their hands clean. They don't want to have to be the people that discipline and keep Michigan out of the playoff. I think they're just hoping behind closed doors that Michigan plays their way out of the playoff. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, I don't think, I don't think their job is disciplinary. I think their job is simply to pick the 4 best teams with the data that they accumulate for the college football playoff. It's NCAA or the conference, the Big Ten, those are the disciplinary measures. But, yeah, it would be easier if they would either play themselves in or play themselves out. If they play themselves in, which I believe I read today where Jim Harbaugh, he is going to be able to coach in the championship game if they make it. But, again, it'll be tremendous distractions and there'll be a negative connotation associated with Michigan until they get it cleared up. It doesn't sound like it's going to be cleared up before the championship game. So I'm sure the NCAA would just as soon Ohio State win, get Michigan out of it. Therefore, let the NCAA, the Big Ten, and the University of Michigan handle the disciplinary action.
Well, I know this here in Dabo Swinney talk about it. I mean, what they did was allegedly did was a major no-no. And you and I talked about it last week. That back in the day you could actually do it, but now you can't. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I'll say this. I heard somebody commenting on it. Well, the players may not have known about it, and the players shouldn't be punished because of that. And I know you're all for the players, coach, but somebody brought up a good point to me about it. And they said this, what about the players on, say, the team that's ranked 5th that gets left out, right? And if those players are also punished if Michigan's put in. And so I would argue that those are the players we should be more concerned about, not the ones, I said this, not the ones that chose to trust Jim Harbaugh, right? Like if you owned a business, coach, and you hired me, and I said, I'm going to go work for Tommy Bowden. I think he'd be a great guy to work with, and, it feels good. But then things run into the tank. I'm out of a job because I made a decision to go work. I trusted the leadership.
Right.
I would say these players trusted their leadership, and that's what failed them, not the system.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I heard the play-by-play, I think it's play-by-play guy from the University of Michigan on one of the radio shows today. And he had made a statement that because he was an ex-player at Michigan, he said, I feel sorry for the players of Michigan. No, you feel sorry for all the teams that they competed against where Michigan had an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty significant unfair advantage if you've ever been in that arena and know how to utilize that type of information. And it's interesting because I listened to that guy, and I don't want to carry on too long, but that Michigan ex-player that's a radio announcer for Michigan, he read off the improvement of Michigan over the last 2 years that supposedly this has been happening, and there is significant improvement statistically, offensively and defensively. And the one thing I've never heard, and this is the last thing, the one thing I haven't heard anybody bring up, and it might have, but I haven't heard. I've listened to a lot of radio the last couple of days on this topic. The 5 Frank Broyles Award finalists. Of course, we know who the Frank Broyles winner was. I believe it was Garrett Riley.
Right.
Won the award. But the 5 finalists, one of them was a first year coordinator at the University of Michigan, defensive coordinator. So all of a sudden, first year coordinating, how do you become automatically, a finalist for Frank Broyles Award? And I hadn't heard anybody tie that. I've heard people talk about statistics, the improvement statistics, but all of a sudden you dig a little bit deeper and unpeel another layer of the onion. You say, oh, well, explain that to me.
Yeah, well, this story doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, as Jim Harbaugh apparently will be banned from the field for the Michigan Wolverines. And Tommy Bowden, the former Clemson Tiger head coach, joins us every Friday right here on Clemson Sports Talk on Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands and around the world on the iHeartRadio app to talk about all the ins and the outs of the world of college football. And last week, we went in pretty deep on the offensive side of the football, and I loved every second of it, Coach. And so did our listeners. Had several people text me to say how much they appreciate it. So zone blocking schemes, the running game. This weekend, Clemson against Notre Dame, the offense shifted. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm no offensive expert, but I said that looks a lot like some of the blocking that Clemson was doing in the running game when Tommy Bowden was the head coach. Talk to us a little bit about what that shift did for Clemson, specifically Phil Mafah, 36 carries, 2 touchdowns, 180, I think 6 yards, something like that he ended up with at the end of the day. And I just said, man, what if they've been running that zone blocking scheme the whole season? And why did it take so long? Walk us through some of that in your opinion.
Zone blocking has been around for a long time. Of course, there's man blocking where you have a certain man to block and you block him regardless where he goes, or there's zone blocking, which every offensive lineman is going to step to the right and block whatever appears in their zone, henceforth zone blocking. You usually do that versus a team that stunts and moves a lot. They'll take their defensive lineman and they'll slant them inside or slant them outside or run the linebacker through. And the reason you go to, when you man block, all of a sudden you take a offensive guard, 320 pounds, trying to take a little bit smaller, quicker defensive lineman, and all of a sudden the defensive lineman has a 3-way go. He can go inside, he can go outside, or he can go straight over top of you. And it's tough to man block a little bit quicker guy. When you zone block, you can just step, and that defensive lineman step. If he slants outside, you got him. If he slants inside, the center or the next man over picks him up as he zone blocks. I'll give you an example, the one I can remember specifically in my coaching career. The one game where we played Georgia Tech, and I think we rushed for over 300 yards. That was Lightning and Thunder. Spiller and Davis rushed for over 300. We went to a zone blocking scheme because the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech did a lot of movement. They slanted and blitzed guys and ran guys through and did twists and things. And all we did was zone block, put a hat on a hat, and let those 2 guys go. And it looks like what's possibly what Clemson did. They went to zone blocking scheme. It picks up a lot of trash. It makes things assignment-wise a little bit easier. So you allow the lineman to be a little more aggressive. He doesn't have to worry about a 3-way go by a defensive lineman. He can step off very aggressively to his right or to his left, but you must have the discipline to pick up whatever's in your area and don't get carried away by picking up trash that looks like it's going to be in your area. You got to block what's there. You can't block pre-snap. You got to block post-snap. After the snap, you block what's in your area. So that's just a little bit as far as a zone blocking scheme.
Well, and it's ironic because they're facing Georgia Tech this weekend. They're going to be wearing all purple, just like they were that night as well. The other thing,
there you go.
Yeah. So the ties there are perfect for us, Coach. Again, Tommy Bowden with us here on the program today. From the standpoint of the running back, how does that change their kind of mindset? Because when I was playing football, you heard coaches say a lot of, he got to hit the hole, But then I'm watching this weekend, and and there's Maffa kind of sneaking behind a lineman, and then when he sees a gap, just hitting it. So talk to us, how is it different for the running backs when you make these changes? I mean, is that a significant change as well?
Yeah, because when you man block, you usually dictate the hole. For example, if your guard's covered, the tackle might block down on that man. The guard might wrap around on the linebacker. But when a tackle blocks down, you dictate to the back that the ball pretty much has to go outside your block because you're blocking down. So it's more hole specific and a little bit more less. You have to run the gap that they're blocking. And man zone blocking, you don't know where the hole is going to appear because you don't know how the stunts are going to appear defensively. There used to be the very first statement I ever heard when I studied this zone blocking scheme back in the 80s, back in the 1980s when it first started coming out. I think it developed by the Cincinnati Bengals back in the pros. I remember watching their offensive line coach, a guy named, I think Jim McAnally, supposedly invented it or started it. But there was a statement you said to the running back, don't run to the hole, run through the hole. So you don't really want to throw a burst of speed until you get to the hole. Other than that, you got to be a little more patient running to the hole and read it as they appear. When all them linemen step to the right or step to the left, and once them defensive linemen stunt, then the hole might appear a little bit later because you're not man blocking and you're not dictating a hole. So you might have seen the running back at Clemson be a little more patient, but all of a sudden hit the hole and go, and he explodes through it. So for the running back, run to the hole, not run through the hole, not to the hole. I mean, hey, be a little patient, be a little slower. And then it looks like Clemson had some pretty good results with it.
Again, Tommy Bowden with us here on the program today, talking a little bit about your Clemson Tigers and the offensive scheme you saw this past weekend in that victory against Notre Dame. Lots of confidence for Clemson going into this game against the Yellow Jackets. And, you know, I think about like the rule changes. I think it was when you and by the way, I didn't mention this last week. Rich Rodriguez was playing down here in Columbia against the Gamecocks, and his Gamecocks nearly topped Shane Beamer's Gamecocks. But you guys, they implemented a rule change on you guys, right, with substitutions at one point. But I feel like in that game against Georgia Tech a couple of years later, they ran a trick field goal with the late Demaryius Thomas. And didn't a rule change come out after that play as well?
Yeah, well, they slipped a guy on there late on the sideline.
Yeah.
What they did. Yeah. I think the rule did change. You have to be so many feet of the huddle or inside the numbers. If you're a substitution, you must come inside the numbers. You just can't step on the field and participate in a play. And I don't know if they've adjusted since that, but that rule change probably had something to do with that play because all of a sudden you used to huddle defensively and you huddle offensively. Now with no huddle, you leave the corner out there. You'd probably see it nowadays because the way offenses have changed. Offenses don't huddle, therefore defenses don't huddle. They both do signals. But, yeah, I can remember that play, and that's probably one of the reasons that they changed the rule where the substituting player has to come inside the numbers to the middle, at least toward the middle of the field, and then go back out and not just step on the field.
Yeah, what a couple of one of those matchups, I guess, where Tiger fans were sort of shocked at the start. I believe that game got out to a 17-0 lead, but you guys, I believe, ended up coming back in that game and maybe coming up just a little bit short. That was the thing about this Georgia Tech rivalry for so many years that you were a part of it. There were tight ball games. There were games where maybe one team was, had a significant lead and then somebody came back. I mean, it really, I think, was indicative of the word rivalry in a lot of respects.
Well, when George O'Leary was there and Ralph Friedgen was the offensive coordinator, they were competitive every year. And even when Chan Gailey came as the head coach at Georgia Tech and had that NFL background and experience, they threw the ball. Their offenses were a lot more explosive than when Paul Johnson was there. Of course, that was a tough offense to defend, but it was the option, and just wasn't nearly as exciting from the ability to recruit better players with that pro-style offense with George O'Leary and Ralph Friedgen and Chan Gailey was I think a little bit more helpful for them than what Paul Johnson did. But of course, he had a lot of success. So different era and different time, and now it looks like they've gone back to more of a George O'Leary, Chan Gailey type of offense, a little more pro-style, throwing things that they can recruit on.
Yeah, Haynes King, the transfer quarterback from Texas A&M. I tell you what, watching him play, not only can he really throw the ball, but I think he's rushed for over 500 some odd yards this year. He's an athletic kid. I think he's going to give Clemson fans more fits than they may expect at this point.
Yeah, he'll have a target on him, though. Clemson's got good enough athletes to really hit you flush. Sometimes quarterback can get to the second level, and he's so quick. You got teams they'll only be able to hit him on the edges where he can survive. But Clemson's athletic enough to hit you a little more flush, hit you a little more head on. So if he runs a lot in the Clemson game and makes it to the whole game, then he's a pretty tough nut.
Just a couple of more minutes here with former Clemson Tiger head coach Tommy Bowden on the program. Also with that victory this past weekend, Dabo Swinney became the winningest coach in Clemson football history, 166 wins. And it's pretty amazing because I think when he was hired, and I know certainly you and Terry Don Phillips kind of had your eye on Dabo Swinney as being the guy that could do the job. But I think there were people out there, I think Pat Forty of ESPN called it a D+ hire. I think, there were fans that kind of thought it was a bit of a joke, but I guess Dabo Swinney got the last laugh, and you know him very well as you were the guy that brought him to Clemson.
Yeah, I think people like Terry Don and myself that worked with him every day in a tight environment where you can see him react, and then you get a chance to be around his wife. His wife is such a tremendous asset as a recruiter and as a coach's wife, and you get a chance to see how they operate with a family. So you see a more complete person than just what some people fans see on game day on the sidelines. And then with my father being a very successful coach, I got a brother that's a successful coach. So it's not like I wasn't familiar with some of the intangibles, or whether I had them or not is questionable, but you could at least see what was necessary to be successful. And Dabo, I thought, had those things, and that D+, he might have obviously he messed up on that, but he's 166. I texted him this week and let him congratulate him. But if he plays his cards right, there'll be a statue in front of that stadium of Dabo Swinney before it's all said and done.
Wow, big words there from Tommy Bowden. And again, Coach, you know how much we appreciate you. You know our listeners love hearing from you. It's always great to keep up with you. Best to your mom. I know you're visiting her in Tallahassee this weekend. Enjoy that, and we will talk to you next weekend.